Hello and welcome to my Archaeology pre-release guide. I am Omid, currently ranked 4 on the highest scores, and I'm going to use my insight and knowledge to give you an upper hand on the skill when it's released. We'll be going through some of my preparations, my theories, and some potential money-making methods on the skill. So let's get right into it. Preparations. So first off, the main tool that you'll be using to excavate in archaeology is the mattock. So luckily you can buy the bronze through Rune at the Archaeology Guild, but Orichalcum, Necronym, Bane and Elder Rune need to be made. You can make these with 2 bars of the respective metal, and they can't be upgraded to the plus variants like it is on mining. So let's move on to perks. I think Hone 5 is going to be the primary perk for archaeology, as it is for every gathering skill, since it has a 10% increased chance of successfully gathering resources. Now Furnace, things get a little bit more complicated. There's a 15% chance of consuming the resource and giving you 100% extra XP for it. Now if we look at this graph, there's 2 ways of this working. Now if Furnace does not break down Artifact, which is technically a gathered resource, their XP per hour will go up slightly as it breaks down the materials and potentially the soil, but the cost also goes up a little bit in the same way. Now if it works the same way as the graph on the right, if Furnace does break down artifacts, every time it breaks down an artifact, you're going to lose a significant amount of XP, significant amount of potential XP, right? Because the best source of XP for archaeology is restoring artifacts, not breaking them down. So every time that happens, you're going to lose a chunk of XP. So it actually might be detrimental. Now, moving on to polishing. Polishing has a 9% chance to transmute a gathered resource to a higher tier. Now, this is how it should work if it works for both materials and artifacts. So every time it upgrades an artifact beyond a level that you can restore it, you're going to kind of be bumped to the point that you'll still have to train the skill at that level, right? But once you get to the level that your artifacts have been upgraded, you get a huge surge of XP. So you might fall behind a little bit, as the graph shows on the left, right? But then once you hit those thresholds, you get a huge boost, because at the end of the day, your artifact rates are probably going to be roughly the same. It just comes down to what level artifacts you're obtaining, right? And it's the same thing with GP spent, right? The materials that you're getting, you might not be able to use right away, but they're usually going to be the more expensive and higher tier ones, right? And then we have Imp Sold, which is hard to fit considering Furnace 3 and Polishing 3. Imp Soul basically has a 15% chance to send a gathered resource to the bank for 30 prayer points. Now this has upsides and downsides. As for mining, it actually banks the ore and doesn't send them to the metal bank. So it might work the same way for materials, which isn't necessarily that bad of a thing, because you can stack up, note them, then bank them into the material deposit. But I will say that Imp Soul is a very, very cheap way to bank items, as it is roughly like 170 GP per bank compared to porters, which are roughly around 1,000 right now. But it only has a 15% chance of banking resources compared to the 100% chance of porters. And you use roughly 11 doses of Super Restore every hour, unless you use, this doesn't include Elven Ritual Shard, or if you are going to go to the extent using Blessed Flask, having only 1 inventory slot. Let's move into game to check some things out. And one of the first things we're going to look at as a max player is challenge stacking. Now you can do this by talking to any challenge mistress, preferably the one in Bothorp or Prif, since you're going to be locked out of the max skill when the new skill comes out. And you want to select, I want to toggle max challenges. And you want to untick at least 5 skills. And basically what this does is every reset you're going to be getting a challenge of one of those unticked skills. You're wondering, how does this help? So basically, after Monday reset, or just prior to Archaeology release, you want to go back to the challenge mistress. I want to toggle max challenges, and you want to tick them now. And basically what this does, it forces archaeology challenges, because archaeology is the only unmaxed and unticked skill when it is released. And you can abuse this by re-rolling your challenges into archaeology challenges post archaeology release, prioritizing the ones that have 1 day left sorted at the top. Right, so what this essentially does is it gives you 5 archaeology challenges when the normal person will have 0. Now, it gets a bit complicated when you think about when to use them, when to reroll them and actually use them. And I would suggest doing this around like when you're about to hit a threshold. So when you're 1 level off hitting the next dig site, maybe that's the time to cash in and rush yourself to the next one while you're at the highest level of the prior dig site. Now let's move on to the bank and check some things out. I have about 10 build GP across spirit shards, GP on my main and GP on my alt, which is mostly going to be spent on materials to restore artifacts and some on chronotes, which we'll get to later. I have about 3.5 bill in skill chompers. Now I wouldn't recommend investing in skill chompers unless you are seriously racing, and even then you want to keep a good balance between the amount of GP you have and the amount of GP you have in skill chompers, since buying materials will probably have a higher priority and higher yield in terms of XP and GP per XP. Now the reason I condone using or investing into skill chompers is because they generally have a very high GP per XP at around 500 to 200 GP per XP at normal prices. Now they've suggested that skill chompers will work very similar to how they work on woodcutting, which basically how they work is whenever you get a successful gather, you get 10% bonus XP. And whenever you fail a gather, you get 5% XP of what you would have gathered. So let's say you would have gotten a 100 XP drop for a gather and you fail it, you get 5 extra XP for it. Thanks to a recent treasure hunt event, magic notepaper are at 1k each, which puts them on par with porters, which range from 900 GP per port for the 5 and 1000 GP per port for the 6. Now, magic notepaper technically take 1 slot with the addition of the materials that are noted in stacking. So you're taking, let's say there's 4 materials in your dig site, right? There's 5 inventory slots, and you can essentially bank however many you want, while also keeping track of how many you have in your inventory. Whereas porters, you're not going to be able to constantly observe that amount. Now with porters as well, it's only 30 up to 30 ports per inventory slot, so you're limited by that. And with the Grace of the Elves, which I recommend using if you are going to invest into porters, you're going to have roughly 1000 ports per bank, and it might not even be worth banking. So you might not end up using that many porters because it might be just worth banking at the deposits than banking to get more porters. The reason I have 14 tool gizmos even though I have all the perks that I'm going to need is because vintage and classic components, 2 of the 4 new archaeology components, have been confirmed to give furnace. Now 5, even though I don't have the ancient gizmo, 5 of these new components might offer something greater than furnace 3. You might get furnace 4 straight away, which could be a pretty big deal. I've got an equipment separator just if something goes wrong, and I've got 8k harmonic dust. Now this is a bit over the top, but I'm actually thinking of making 2 sets of matics. Now if you remember earlier, I was talking about how furnace can actually has the possibility of breaking down an artifact. Now what if I had a matic with hone 5 furnace 3 and a matic with hone 5 and polishing 3? Right, I switch to my polishing matic as I'm about to hit the guaranteed artifact, and I have a 0 chance of actually breaking it down. Now Ring of Whispers is there because it gives a passive buff to every gathering skill in the game, and it could also give some kind of benefit for archaeology even though it's not been pointed out. Luck of the Dwarves, if Ring of Whispers doesn't work, just to complement the effect of Grace of the Elves. An interesting one is Dwarf Wheat Incense Stick. They've recently been confirmed to work as a 10% chance to act like a porter, even though you're not going to spend too much on them throughout your goal, whether it's 200 mil or 99. They're not actually that cost efficient, ranging from 800 GP per bank assuming 100% success rate to 1600 GP per bank assuming 50% success rate. One of the downsides of Dwarfweed Incense Sticks and Imp Sold, in my opinion, is that there's no control over what is banked, right? Where porters, you have complete control, so it's an on and off switch and it banks 100% of them. And Magic Notepaper has the benefit of being able to see what you have noted, but not being able to note things like artifacts. I would say Dwarfweed Incense Sticks is at the bottom, but even so, might be worth using considering you'll have to bank less for porters and your porters end up lasting longer. Then I've got some Gizmo Dissolvers, just in case if I want to remove a perk that I've found to be useless. And I've got Blessed Flask and Extreme Prayer, which I don't expect to be using with Imp Soul. Then I've got some Yak Pack pouches and some Winter Storage Scrolls for extra banking and storage. Then I've got Wizwax for the daily challenge extends and the initial rerolls. Note that daily challenges will actually give 50% less XP for the 6-month amnesty period as well. And lastly, for preparations, one thing to not forget is post-Archaeology release, Lootscape streams on Twitch will actually give you a benefit for Archaeology. We don't know what that is, but I'm assuming it's untradeable, similar to the Big Game Hunter one with Anachronia release. So that can be a pretty big deal for the race, as any boost can give the upper hand. Now, it could be materials, which it would be just GP, but I would imagine that they're going to give an artifact relative to your level. Now onto the interesting stuff, the theories. So Archaeology training in its simplest form is pretty straightforward. The gathering side of the skill allows you to excavate materials and artifacts, while the artisan side of the skill allows you to restore those artifacts using the materials. A non-linear part of the skill is something called Gilnor's Greatest Mysteries, where players are required to tap into lore and uncover the secrets. Now, this is the first time in any skill where exploration heavily benefits training the skill. I think that qualification should have the highest priority when training the skill, since it gives significant untradeable benefits such as the skilling outfit. Now, it can be a bit complicated trying to acquire these qualifications. Let's say, for example, there's a dig site area ranging from level 1 to 10 and you hit level 10 without completing all the qualifications specific to that area. Do you stay in that area for lower archaeology XP rates but to complete the qualifications earlier, or do you move on to the next area and come back later with possible higher success rate and a definite method thanks to community gathered information? So what makes qualifications so great? Well, let's look at one of the rewards, which is the Archaeology Guild Shop. At Intern level 5, which is what you get after completing the tutorial, you get the Archaeology temporary buffs, similar to the ones at Deep Sea Fishing, which encourage group skilling. Assistant level 40 unlocks Precision Matic. Associate level 70, the only thing we know is the skilling outfit. Professor, we don't know the level or the rewards, but the level could be estimated at level 80 to 85. Guildmaster level 99, you unlock this elite skilling outfit priced at 50k per piece, totaling to 250k chronotes. And you get a Precision Matic buff, and that suggests, according to the trend, that you unlock a Precision Matic buff across every single unlock other than Intern. Another great benefit from qualifications is that it gives you access to high level researchers. Now, some of these require quests, but basically what you do is you send a team of 1 to 4 on a trip by paying them chronotes, and they come back with archaeology XP that scales with your archaeology level. Not enough to dictate the way you train, and also not enough to deter you from training. I want to use the elite skilling outfit and time sprites to prove what Matic based precision does. So if we look at one of the effects of the elite skilling outfit, it says 7% increase your excavation success rate, which probably means higher success rate of gathering materials, soil and artifacts. Now, it also says 7% increase to matic-based precision, which means that it can't be a higher gather success rate, as we initially thought. And if we use the time sprite benefit as well, which says it can double the matic-based precision, we can assume that the matic-based precision is defined as increasing the blue bar over your head when you're excavating, which is when you fill that, you get the guaranteed artifact. Now, when you go to a dig site and you uncover a excavation spot, it uncovers a set of spots, usually in a set of 3 as shown in streams, and the time sprite seems to jump between these spots, so it's fair to assume that these spots all give the same materials and artifacts. Now, the time sprite initially in the stream took 2 minutes and 33 seconds to jump from the initial spot to another spot, and as we can see, the sprite focus gives a 10% increase to Archaeology XP from just being at the time sprite. Now, what the buff does is that bonus 40%, a further 10% increase to Archaeology XP, and a 10% increase to your matic precision. Bonus 100%, guaranteed material, and 2 times matic precision for a single action. Your focus is then reduced to 60%. Now, how this time sprite buff works is that every action you perform at the time sprite gives you 2% buff increase, and the actions take 4 ticks. While you're on a time sprite, it does not decay. But if you're off the time sprite, it decays by 1% every 9 ticks. Now onto the juicy stuff, the money-making methods. Using 120 herb and farm as a prime example, you could make upwards of 100 mil an hour post-launch for about 7 hours. And I think the same opportunity arises for archaeology launch, especially considering that there are over 800 people at 5.4 bill who are going to be competing for higher ranks and are willing to spend ridiculous amounts of money on supplies to do so. And you guys could take advantage of that. Let's start with a low time investment methods. It is aimed at people who don't have that much time to play but still want to take advantage to make some money. Now, one of the first things you can do is as soon as you start training the skill, you can sell pretty much all your tradables. This is going to be mostly materials and chronotes, but this will cause you to fall behind on training the skill. Another thing you can do is smith high-level matics. Even though this is going to be decent GP per hour initially, I imagine this falling flat very quickly since most people have access to it. Another thing you can do is bypass the G limits for people, and depending on how many people have alt accounts and how bad the G limits are, this can be very, very, very good GP per hour, even though it's not going to be consistent, as people are usually willing to spend or pay 100 mil an hour for services. And lastly, you can watch the market and capitalize on anything that spikes in demand, or maybe a method that comes in that uses a certain material, and you can capitalize on that by just farming it and selling it. And usually the best way to get this type of information are streams. Streams are essentially like a funnel for information. There's constantly new information, theories, methods, ideas being put in Twitch chats, and it's a great way of acquiring them. Moving on to medium time investments. First off, we have the Dragon Matic, which is upgraded to Crystal, Imcando, and then Space and Time Matic. And there's 2 ways of obtaining the Dragon Matic. One is through Archaeology, and I wouldn't recommend this since I assume you're not going to get it early on. And number 2 is through either an existing Slayer mob, boss, or maybe even a brand new Slayer monster, since you can farm that straight away. Number 2, we have disassembling and packing archaeology components. These archaeology components are used to make a lot of the new invention items from Stormguard, and they also have new perks like Ruthless, Relentless, and Fortune. Now you can disassemble artifacts to give these components, and you can pack them in a set of 100 or 1,000 and then sell them off. Number 3, we have using friends chat to hunt material caches. Material caches is essentially a cache that spawns in set locations all around Gillinor and within dig sites that give a set material, and they work very similar to normal resources like trees where they deplete over time of use. And I assume that there's going to be FCs for them to hunt them and scout for them and rotate through them. Lastly, we have the high time investment methods. It's for people in the long run looking to yield the most amount of money they can from the skill release. First on the list, we have invest in leveling the skill fast and cash out by selling materials at a high level. Now, there's going to be a certain point towards the end game where people racing to 200 mil are going to be way ahead of the average player. This means that the supply rate of the materials that they need for restoring artifacts is going to go down. And if this period is going to last long, aka like 10 plus hours, it might be wise for you to cash out, moving your focus from training the skill to gathering materials. Secondly, in Stormguard, we have the invention blueprint fragments. These are made similarly to the Surge and Escape codices from Anachronia in the sense that the untradeable variants are cheaper to make than the tradable ones. These are also made to make the Ancient Gizmos and Soil Screener, which is going to be big because it benefits Archaeology directly. Lastly, we have Farm Demonic Summoning Pouches. Now, we already know that the PVM familiars are some of the best, and they've recently confirmed that there are 2 skilling familiars, and if one of them benefits Archaeology, it would be big. So basically, once you get to the Infernal Source dig site, you acquire materials or artifacts that we don't know that allows you to bind demons once you kill them in the overworld. Before I leave, I want to place an idea in front of you. So, we all know that Stormguard provides Ancient Invention, Infernal Source with Ancient Summoning, but what about the other 3 dig sites? So kharid-et is the Zarosian dig site. What if it expands on the ancient magics that exist? What if Everlight, the Saradominist dig site, gives you ancient Saradominist prayers expanding on the normal prayer book? And Warforge, what if it provides ancient smithing? There is already confirmed a spear that is coming out, so maybe you forge it together similar to the dragon plate body. Thank you for watching through to the end. This is the first time I've made a video like this, so it's been an experience. If you want any more information, or if you want to be kept up to date with information on release, I highly recommend checking out streams on Twitch or getting onto the Archaeology Discord, which will all be in the description. See ya.